This is a guppy, and this is a growl. Longtime fans will recognize these as lore-accurate depictions for what Grumble's stages of growth, not currently present indoors, could look like, with the growl being the stage of development between a giggle and a grumble, and the guppy being the stage before the giggle. Now, right now, these are just concepts for what these Grumble life cycle stages could look like. But would you believe me if I said there's actually a chance they could be coming to the game? I know, it sounds crazy, right? But just hear me out on this. Essentially, ever since Floor 2 released indoors, players have been speculating what new characters could be present in Floor 3, such as the Seek-infected Queen Grumble. However, I recently uncovered a massive discovery that could point to entities such as the guppy and growl concepts, or for better wording, alternative giggle life cycle growth stages, actually being present in Floor 3. So, in this video, I'll be going over this discovery, as well as its implications for these new entities to actually come to the game. So, with all of that being said, let's begin. Alright, so let's first start with going over what exactly the guppy and growl are. I've already made videos about these concepts, but here's the quick rundown. Essentially, as we all know, a giggle will eventually grow up to become a grumble. However, there is a massive age gap between those two entities. So I've created some concepts for what those in-between stages of development could look like. And given trends within the giggle life cycle, these are lore-accurate depictions of these hypothetical growth stages for the giggles. The growth that's most notable has to be the growl, as that is the stage occurring between the giggle and grumble stage. They have a more screech-like facial structure, given how screeches are slightly older than normal giggles, and they have 7 tentacles and fewer eyes than a normal grumble. The guppy is on the opposite side of the spectrum though, being the very first stage of development for the species, occurring even before the giggle phase. They are notable for having less teeth, eyes, and tentacles than their future phases. Now, that's good and all, but what am I going on about how these concepts could appear in Floor 3? Well, as you may know, Floor 2 only consists of 3 stages of the Grumble life cycle, those being giggles, grumbles, and screeches, which, as I have said before, given their physical appearance, we know they are a little older than normal giggles. Now, obviously, giggles and screeches don't grow 10 times their size overnight and become a grumble, and that means other stages of their life cycle do exist somewhere within the game. The only issue is we have never seen these other stages, as they don't appear in the nest, which is the home of the grumbles, or anywhere else in the mines, which is where they roam. This means that these other stages of development for the giggle have to be somewhere our player character has never been inside of, and I have a couple of reasons to believe they actually exist within the castle, the next floor we will enter. Now, I've got a bunch of evidence to back up this claim, so let's go through that. For one, we know that the mines in the castle are directly connected via the sewers. The Queen Grumble, like most queen animals, is implied to be the mother of a majority of giggles in the mines. And given how they only reside in the nest up until the player intrudes, it's implied that all giggles are born in the nest and eventually disperse to the rest of the mines. Now, we know that the other grumble stages don't appear in the mines, so they have to be located elsewhere. Yet that location has to be connected to the nest through some path so they can actually reach the place. Luckily for us, the castle is connected to the nest as well as the rest of the mines via the sewers, so it's entirely possible these other grumble stages just move there once they reach a certain age, and then return back to the nest when they mature into grumbles. This is actually a somewhat common behavior between animals in real life, such as salmon, who move far away from their birthplace for one reason or another during their lifetime. Yet this isn't the only evidence I have, as on top of the castle being accessible, it's also the perfect habitat for these grumble stages to live in. This species lives and thrives underground, so it wouldn't make sense for them to relocate to an area such as the upcoming garden subfloor, as that takes place on the surface. However, the castle not only appears to be abandoned, much like the hotel, but its large rooms and high roof mimic the atmosphere of a typical dark and expansive cave, so it wouldn't really be an issue for these grumble stages to adapt to their castle environment. Now, with this logic in mind, you might be asking why they didn't relocate to the hotel as well, as that can be dark and it is roofed like the castle. However, the hotel is a lot smaller than the mines, and what the castle appears to be, and it seems to have a lot more light than either of the other floors, which aren't ideal conditions for the Grumble species given their sensitivity to light and how large they grow. Besides the mines, the castle seems to be a perfect environment for alternative stages of growth for the species to survive in, so it is definitely possible we could encounter them in Floor 3. Additionally, these Grumble stages being present in the castle would also explain the naming behind the Queen Grumble. Now, canonically, almost every entity in the game is named after the player character, so they don't typically hold any significance. However, the glitch fragment entities, which are implied to share this trait of being named by the player, actually do have significant names, as when deciphered they spell out the word glitch. This means that entity names can be significant lore-wise, and that means we should question why the Queen Grumble is named the Queen Grumble. Now, typically, most animals that are given the queen title for not only being the ruler of their colony, but also to be the childbearer. The Queen Grumble fulfills both of those roles, so that could be the main reason why they are named that way. But the character itself isn't female, as all entities are canonically genderless as confirmed by the developers. This leads me to believe that maybe, just maybe, the queen title for this character has another purpose besides just biological functions for the entity, and that could tie back into the Grumble growth stages being present in Floor 3. Castles are commonly associated with monarchs that take the name of king and queen. Now, I'm not saying the Queen Grumble rules the castle or built it or anything crazy like that, but I am saying that due to their naming, it's possible they could be indirectly associated with the castle via how their children potentially end up migrating there during their growth. Now, as I've said, the queen themselves never leaves the nest, except for when the player arrives. But given how they are the ruler and protector of the Grumble species, and how some of their offspring could potentially be living inside of that castle, I'd see it fitting to be a reason why they're named as the Queen. Even if this isn't the case, it would be a very cool play on words, and it perfectly would explain why the Grumble stages are present in this floor rather than in the mines. So I definitely think it should be something that is considered. All in all, I'd say it's at least possible we could finally meet additional Grumble development stages such as the Guppy and the Growl in Floor 3, given the evidence I've provided. And even though it's unlikely these new entities would look exactly like the concepts I've created, I feel they would at least somewhat resemble them, so these are something good to go off of for now. Not only is the castle accessible to members of this species, as it can be entered through the sewers which are connected to the mines, but it also is a perfect environment for them to survive in. And it would be another reason that explains why the Queen Grumble is named the way they are. So, with all of that being said, let me know in the comments what you think of this theory, as well as what additions you think should be added to it. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.